Hi, I'm Michele Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them. Hey, and welcome to a very exciting and special edition of Hey, I Want Your Job. Today, I am rejoined by the amazing Dr. Kirsten Lehill, who is one of my favorite people and one of my favorite guests of the past. And we are not here to talk about her job. We are here to talk about your job search today. Dr. Kirsten is a researcher and purveyor of truths with regards to how to do good science. And so we're going to look today and break apart some of the myths of job searching, two in particular. So, Kirsten, where are we starting?
I think we got to start with the eye tracking.
Girl. Okay. All of you out there listening in podcast land, if you have not heard, recruiters look at your resume for an average of 10 seconds, 17 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I have heard like a whole range of second numbers, stemming from like somewhere between 30 and 0. The ongoing consensus is no more than 30. We tracked this down to a study.
The study that said 7.4 seconds.
7.4 seconds. Kirsten and I went deep undercover, emailing the people who created this study. It was put out by the Ladders. For anybody who does not know the Ladders are a fantastic example of a scam organization that charge you saying that they're going to get you a job as an executive. I've been in recruitment for over 20 years. I've known a lot of people who gave them money. I have never known a single person to ever, and I do mean ever, get a job through them. And I also don't know any other recruiters who do either. And I know a lot of recruiters. So, like I said, probably a scam. I'm going to add probably because I don't want to get sued. But that's who did the study.
We don't know.
We don't know for sure. More information would be required.
Yeah.
So, Kirsten, take them to task. Take it apart. What did we find out?
Yeah.
What's the deal?
Yeah. So what we found out when we reached out to them, well, when Michele reached out to them, just to ask, like, first, let me say, top red flag, if you cannot easily find where someone's information came from, that to me is like already like you should be questioning what you're reading. Like you shouldn't have to email people and like go digging and like search to such a great extent to find out like very simple information that if you've done research should be like top of mind, very easy to spit out to people. So like that's a red flag.
So let's pause for a second and talk about what that information is, because I think that's so key.
Yeah.
So in general, for good research, you should know things like methodology. How did they find out this information? What did they do? Is it self-reported? Was there a test? Was there multiple choice? Was there observation? And then you should also know sample set. Like how many people did they measure?
Who are the people? Like, where did they come from? Like, it could, sometimes it's not even like, is it a different country? Is it the country? Is it the state I'm interested in? Are you surveying people in a different industry? Right? Like all those little facts about people.
And what did you do for control? That's the other big question always, because you can't do research like where everybody gets the pill, right? Like you have to have a control segment. So that is much harder with this type of research.
Yeah.
To be fair. But
yes. And you can do good. Like the thing is, it's like you can do good research without a control, but you can't say that it's like causal, right? Like that's the big thing with like the control is if you want to say like this caused this thing, you have to have a control. And like, I know one time I said like, I didn't even say cause. That's like a lighter version of cause, and someone was like, that's too close to suggesting a cause. Like if you didn't have a control group, you got to say like was related to, like correlation, like you really got to temper
in the same place, but we don't know anything else. Could have
Could
just
be.
been like the hot friend that came along. Don't know. Don't know.
Exactly.
Like all of, disclaimers. And so for this one, like in my head, what we found out is that they use eye tracking software, which I have questions about that. Like, how do they know your eyes?
Right.
We know that AI
Yep.
notoriously is not good with non-white faces. So did
Yep.
they only look at white faces? And if they didn't, what did they do to compensate for that? Which AI were they using?
Yep.
We couldn't get any answers about like who these people were.
Just
They
that
just
there
said
are 40 to 50 of them.
40 to
40 to
50
50 people.
recruiters. And we have no idea. There's recruiters and then there's recruiters. So we have no idea if these are like seasoned professionals like me who are old and grumpy and feel like we've seen it all 15 times, or if they're like new baby recruiters or people who are just nicer than me, like Dan Roth, who's a sorcerer and actually reads shit and is just a lovely human being. So we have no idea who these people are, what this magical software was. A good control would have, just to juxtapose, it would have said, hey, we have these 50 people. If you're going to use a bad data sample set, that's fine. We have these 50 people. We're going to show them resumes. We're going to track their eye movement. Great. We also showed them this page of normal literature and checked how long, what their eye movement was like on that. And then you have something to compare.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't know. Maybe
You
that's
also-
just what people do.
Well, it's also, you don't even know the setup, right? It's like the sentence back to you is like they were reviewing PDFs on a computer screen. And like, I don't know, like, was their computer screen, like when you go take like the GRE or the LSAT, like your computer screen locks, like you can only look at the test. I'm like, was their screen locked? Like, could they only look at that PDF, or like, could they have been doing a million other things? Like, are like Slack notifications popping up? It's just, you have no freaking clue.
None. And you don't even know like what percentage zoom is this thing on, right? Like,
yeah,
how much information do I have on my screen? Can I even freaking read it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you put it up with like this tiny font, I'm going to be like, I don't know what this says. And you also don't know like how good these resumes were.
Yeah.
What resume?
Yeah, totally.
Let me tell you, again, there's resumes and then there's fucking resumes.
Well, yeah, like how long were the resumes? Like formatting. There are a lot of things, and I'm not a recruiter. I would imagine though, there are a lot of things that go into like readability of a resume and how long it takes to look at things. It's like we literally have none of this information. The Ladders probably does. They did this study, but like none of that was shared, you know?
Okay, now let's be fair, Kirsten. No part of the information we got from them or the study itself gives me confidence that they have a Scooby-Doo of a clue what any of that would be. Like, to be fair, I think that they were just like, hey, Bob, I got this eye tracking software. I feel like I've got a great idea for an article. How many folks can we round up in the office today? And like, that's what they did. That is the overall feeling I have. And yet, like, now it has become this institution in like recruitment and job searching. And it's so bullshit. And it's
Well, and I'll say, like, from my perspective, like, what people are doing wrong is like, just be transparent about what you did. Because, like, by not putting all, if you want to just get 50 of your buddies together and try out your eye tracking software, like, more power to you. But, like,
right.
when you share that with the world, you better be like damn clear that that is what you did, because you are facilitating the misuse of that information, right? Like, and that to me is like what's so frustrating and wrong is it's like people do, like, we call it like convenience sampling. And that's like basically like asking your friends, or like a snowball sample where you ask your friends and they ask their friends. It's not like that's the worst thing you could do, but you can't do that and then pretend like it was like something else, right? It's like really that piece of transparency where, by not explaining how you got this information and being super vague and like hyping it up and seeing it get picked up everywhere, like that to me is like wrong. That's like unethical and like super freaking irresponsible.
Well, and I think what also kind of pissed me off about it was that this was not their first offense. They had done, this was a redo of a previous experiment. is how they phrased it, that they had done this before, same bad pseudoscience, similar results. But again, no freaking context to actually give you as a job seeker, me as a recruiter, or anybody else any idea what the hell is happening. I know as a recruiter, I am lazy and generally contrary. So I know if I get a resume and if it is a good quality resume, I can usually tell in 30 seconds or less if it's applicable to what I'm looking for. And if it is, great, I might read a little bit more, but probably not. Probably I'm just going to reach out and talk to them. And if it's not applicable, I'm just going to put it in the bin. If it in the bin, meaning like in the no thank you. And yes, I send rejections because I'm not a dick, so I don't ghost people. But like it's gonna be a no. If you have a crappy resume, then I can't tell in 30 seconds who you are, why I care. Like that is one of the great truth. Like you need to make it really, really, really explicit. But people get so scared about these numbers that they hear. And it all feeds into this panicky mentality about, oh, recruiters don't spend any time with you. Like they're not even looking. It's 7 seconds is all you get. Bullshit.
Yeah.
You get a hell of a lot more of my time than that if you're appropriate for my role. And it just,
But also, like, that's not even useful information. Like, if you go to someone, it's like, you know what, you only have 7.4 seconds to make an impression. It's like, okay, well, what I would like to know then is like, what is the first thing the recruiter is looking at? Or like when the recruiter's going to the next resume, like, okay, let's stop for a second. Why did you go to the next resume? Like, what was it? And it's like, oh, well, maybe it was like fit. And it's like, if they're only spending 7 seconds on my resume because I look like a bad fit, that's useful to know, right? These are just like scary stats that are not helpful.
Well, and I think that that's another really good point is that we don't know in this study, did they have a job spec that they were screening them against?
Yeah.
Were they candidates that should have been a good match? Because if you just ask me to look at a resume, you know what is not a fun thing to read, Kirsten? A resume.
Yeah. Sure.
Great literature? It is not. Not even a really good resume. Never in all of my many, many years have I been like, dude, this resume is a real page turner. Like, that's not a thing. Just not a thing.
Yeah.
So there's so many questions that just make all of this information completely useless. And it pisses me off no end that there is so much scaremongering that goes into what we tell job seekers. And so I think that segues kind of nicely to our other big myth that we're going to bust the hell out of. Drop some truth on us, Kirsten. What's the next one?
What's our next one?
The other one.
The amount of time from TalentWorks.
Yep. So we found some fabulous studies that told you how much time and how many applications the average job seeker has to go through to find a job.
So an average job seeker, and this is like even outdated, it still gets quoted presently, but it is from a few years ago, was that job seekers spend 3 hours and 16 minutes looking for jobs every day. Every day. That's like, I mean, I don't, tell me, does that seem like that's possibly
far too little? Yes, it does seem like it's possibly far too little. Yes, it does.
Well, I've put in my 3 hours, I guess we're done.
Oh, okay, so we found this stat that kept getting bandied everywhere. And when I say everywhere, like we found it in postings from 2021, from 2020, like straight back to when we found the root of the evil here. And the original was from 16? Is that right?
I think their first one was, I want to say it was 2019.
Okay.
I'm going to pull it up right now and double check. I think it was 2019, but well, that's not true because their original was during the recession. So they first looked at this in like 2008 during the recession.
Right. So it's like 2008. And then it got like, they said they refreshed it, but they never give any idea where the hell this information comes from. And for
So
anybody with a
I-
pulse, right? The market today, this is June of 2021, and the market even 12 months ago, let alone 18 months ago, looked nothing fucking alike.
well, and what I was gonna say is, so I spent to me, I spent 20 minutes, which I think 20 minutes, well, like that's longer than anyone else is gonna spend. Like people are like, it's not 20 minutes isn't that long to spend to dig into something. 20 minutes is a long time. No one's out there to spend 20 minutes digging into things. But so I went through,
Especially as a professional researcher. I mean, let's put that in there,
right?
right? Like, your
Yeah,
Google game and my Google game are not the same, Kirsten. So like
that's
digging, it's different.
but
You're
I
not
was
casual.
curious because they do this whole, like TalentWorks does this whole, the science of the job search, right? So they have like tons and tons of stats. And so I was just curious, like, where does this come from, right? So it took me 20 minutes of Googling to find out that most commonly where their information is coming from is like they have a database of users and they're looking through like job postings and applications from their database. And like that's how they're finding, that's their science of the job search. That's like all of this stuff that they're coming up with, like all comes from their like database of users. Can you find anything easily about their database of users? No, like literally nothing. I was like, how do you even join the database of users? They're out of business now, so definitely can't find out. But are they still being quoted? Yes. And it's just like, okay, so again, another case of like a company who like clearly had skin in this game, producing like scary stats, right? And like
Yeah.
then, but then also like providing like, well, here are some tips based on like what we found. And it's like based on what you found in your secret database of users that I don't know anything about. You know what I mean? And like I always like to say, it's like, to be fair, like let's assume they have all this information and like we just can't get it. It's like maybe this is like really great credible data. Maybe. But like
Seems
we don't
unlikely.
know that. So like that's the problem. Is like we don't know that. Like one of the things they found was like you should apply for jobs on Mondays because you're more like it increases your hireability by 46% if you apply on a Monday.
I call
Like
bullshit on that. But I do.
I mean
So here's the thing, like so much of what they said and so much of what those bad pseudo statistics are about come from places that experiential wisdom supports. So I counsel people with something similar, but I don't make up a bunch of fucking statistics about it. I tell people your best bet is to apply for me. If you're going to apply through like the website or through LinkedIn, Tuesday through Thursday are your best days because everybody else is going to go home at the weekend and be like, I hate my job space. I'm going to apply for 18,000 jobs on the LinkedIn. And so I'm going to come back Monday morning with a fucking mountain of applicants. You don't want to be in the mountain? Don't be in the mountain. Tuesday morning, I have now gone through the mountain, and now you have the opportunity to come across my plate when I'm a little bit fresher, when I'm not like trying to rush to clear all of these out. Plus, my Monday morning meeting is plus, 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 plus. So, but that's not like I don't have a stat. I just have 20 fucking years of experience doing this shit to tell you like that is my experience as a recruiter. It is possible that other recruiters have other experiences. But anecdotally, I will tell you that all of the recruiters I know, and again, that is many, will tell you the same thing. A Monday morning is a beast. Like everybody, like the Sunday evening, I hate my job blues are a thing. And so everybody hates their job on Sunday. So everybody applies for jobs Sunday night. They apply for jobs. They click the button on LinkedIn for resume help. Like they do all that shit because like, oh, I don't want to go back to work on Monday. And that's
makes sense.
fine. But like if you are like, I need a fucking job, then don't be in that, right? Like you have other
Yeah.
times available. So that's what frustrates me is that when we obfuscate the core message, what we do is we terrify people and that just gets easy to dismiss. Like as soon as somebody lobs some bogus stats at me, I'm like, Psh, I quit listening to you. You're
And
obviously
there are so many stats on this, but the other one we were thinking about was that it takes over 200 applications to get a job. And so they end up like breaking it down by like different like for HR people, for people in tech, but like generally
yeah.
their consensus it's like over 150 applications to get a job. That I would imagine as a job seeker feels a little like disheartening. You're starting on maybe like your first job, maybe you're on your 10th, even if you're on your 10th job application, you're like, oh cool, well it's going to take over 200 to get a
Right.
job.
So
Like,
I advise my job seekers to aim for 30 to 40 applications a week. So if you think about that, right, you're searching for 5 days a week. That's between 6 and 8 applications a day. That's a lot. But if this is you're a full-time job seeker, that's not undoable. And it just gets results quicker, and it lets you know if your tools are working quicker. Because if you are out there and applying for job after job after job, and you don't ever get any interviews, then your shit doesn't work.
yeah.
Either your resume is bad or you're applying for the wrong jobs.
Yeah.
One of those two things is happening. So if you do that like 2 jobs a week, it's going to take a lot of weeks for you to have any statistically significant data on how well you're performing. So that's why I recommend at that level. But again, I hate like I tell them that that's why. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to make
Well,
shit up.
that's what I was going to say is the difference too, is like, I think that when you hire an expert, like if someone wants to work with you, like you're an expert in this industry, they've seen your credentials, they've seen your work, whatever. Then when you say something, you're like, in my experience, like that's what you're couching it. You're not making up crap. You're saying
Yeah.
like, in my experience, this is what I see. And like, because I've decided to work with you and I trust you, like, okay, good. You know what I mean? Like, that's very different than like, there is no way that any of those stats would have gotten picked up as much if someone was like, hey, you know what? I sat down and thought about like the people I've historically worked about. And I think people probably apply to about like 100 jobs. There's no way that's getting picked up by like popular publications. But when it's suddenly it's like science and like science is showing this research, I'm using air quotes for anyone who can't see me, research is showing this, like that to me is when it's like, well, that's bullshit, right? Because now you're like using terms like science and research to try to make something sound very true and reputable, and like not giving any evidence to back up that it is either of those things.
Well, and I think that the problem with all of this is that it is very difficult to conduct research in the HR and talent acquisition space. Intensely difficult because it's very hard to compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
So my first red flag when I looked at those chart breakdowns for the by sector, I straight up called bullshit. Tech and HR are not 2 separate sectors. Every tech company has HR. There are very few just HR companies. So what are you measuring? If you ask me as a recruiter, so when I was director of talent acquisition for the YMCA, if you ask me for my sector, is my sector HR? Is my sector recruitment? Is my sector nonprofit? I would have answered that my sector was talent acquisition because honestly, fuck those other guys. But that's me, right? And so it's like what you always say when you're talking about how to write best ways to write a bad survey question is to not be sufficiently specific. And that's exactly, so often we see that. And there is no way to know what the individual is measuring. Unless you said something like, what's your primary job function? Maybe.
Yeah. Or like you could pick, like, think about the organization you work for. What sector is that organization in? And then like what part of the organization do you work in? Because you're right, like most people hopefully have like an IT department. You know what I mean? Like it's totally different to be like, here's my function in an organization that serves this larger purpose, which is exactly to your point, why when we ask these ambiguous questions, it's like, I have no, like, I don't know, like everyone could be thinking completely differently about this question. And now your data's crap because someone answered saying they're in HR, someone answered saying they're in the nonprofit space because they do HR for a nonprofit. And it's like, now the data doesn't make sense.
So we actually did that when I was at the Y. We had to demonstrate this. We did like a little survey thing and we asked everybody like one of the questions was, what sector are you in? We had childcare, we had education, we had parks and recreation, we had nonprofit. All of those answers from people sat in the same office at the same company, working to the same goals. And so much of it is about how you feel about your work without more of a guidepost, right? So the YMCA is a great example. They have after school, in the schools programs. They have summer camps that involve all kinds of training and educational, but also involve running around and, getting sweaty. But they also have lifestyle and fitness, and like they have all of those within one organization. And that's true for most organizations. Even if it's not that they offer multiple products and services, but you have different things that different roles are delivering. And so you have to, I can't even think how you would word it. Kirsten, help me. How would you even word it so that you would get the same answer from everybody at the YMCA?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think
I put you on the
because, yeah, I know. Well, because I think because the YMCA does a number of different things, like even if you were asking about like overall, what does the YMCA do? Probably depending on your proximity to the different functions, like you would answer different things. And so I would assume like if I was to survey people at the YMCA, I would want to sit down, like whoever's running the YMCA and be like, tell me, like, what are the primary functions of the YMCA? Right. And so then when I'm going through this going through the possible answer categories, it'd be like, well, like all these people picked something that was on that director's list. You know what I mean? Because I think that it's, unless you have people memorize, you know what I mean? And say like, FYI, at the YMCA, you should always check the box. It says, right? Like you just like, I think you'd have to go through and look at like what is acceptable. But I also think to your point, you'd want to split out roles. Like, and I love people like never want to add in like navigational, like narrational language to surveys. And like, I love it because I'm like, actually, please explain to me what I should be thinking about. Like you might say something like, first, we're going to ask you some questions about what the YMCA as an organization does overall. Then we're going to dig into what your specific role at the YMCA is. Now I'm already thinking like, okay, part one, YMCA, big YMCA. Part two, what is Kirsten's role at the YMCA? And like, you don't see that often though. You just see like, what does your organization do?
But I think you're still right though, because like I know I have done this and I'm sure everybody else has too. Like you've done some kind of a fucking survey that you had to do for some shit. And like you answered the first half for yourself. And then you get to stage B and it's like, and now answer these for yourself. You're like, oh crap. Now I have to go back and undo all of that. I did not realize that at that point when you said you meant like my organization. Okay, do over. So no, I think that like I have totally experienced exactly what you're talking about. But I think that doing like one organization doesn't get you useful data. Like you need a cross sample across sectors, organizations, etc. And then you just take those problems that we talked about, like with the YMCA, and then extrapolate that. If you imagine you're surveying 100 organizations, that's 100 times you have that same fucking problem. And if each one is going to do something about all of their roles, they each probably have 100 roles. So again, from an exponential issue of like flaws and potentially damaged survey data, like it is really, really difficult to measure anything in this space for that reason. Exactly.
Well, and I think it comes back to people needing to be really intentional about like, what is the question you are trying to answer? Like, you would not do research that says, how long do recruiters look at resumes? Because that's too big. Like, to your point, like, it's not specific enough. There's too many industries. Like, you would want to say, like, even like saying like in STEM would still be really big, right? Like, you might want to start and say, like, in companies that meet XYZ criteria, how long do recruiters spend looking at resumes?
Well,
Right?
I would say, yeah. So I would say you would do more like, personally, I would say more like, so there's difference between a recruiter and a sorcerer. So a sorcerer is that, all about the lingo.
Yeah.
So for bigger organizations, a sorcerer are the people who look at the bulk resumes and like deal with applicants in bulk. And then recruiters are the people who are the middleman between the probably qualified candidates and the organization. So I am not a sorcerer. I've done my time, Kirsten. And so like I have fabulous partners that send me like, hey, we found these 20 people, we've contacted them. Great. I then get contacted by those people and then I just go and have interviews with them and I do the screening because I've talked to the hiring manager. I know what they want, know what their skill set is, I know like all of that sort of thing. And then I guide that candidate through the process and the sorcerer doesn't. Like the sorcerer just hangs out and goes and finds the next body. So there is a very big difference between how long I spend looking at somebody's resume and how long my sorcerers spend looking at somebody's resume. They are doing this rapid fire in bulk. So they're going to be more in the like 20 to 10 seconds. I have already admitted to being completely lazy. So I'm like the 30 to 40 seconds. But like the more useful number would be to say, how long does the average sorcerer at a big tech organization take? And then you could look at all of these sorcerers at Amazon or Google or what have you, who are in a similar space, similar scale, similar talent pool, and have people all with the same fucking job. That would then be like, to me, and you would only need 4 because they each have hundreds of sorcerers. So you could get statistically significant data from them. No, I guess that's another question I have. So I keep bandying this term around, statistically significant data.
Yeah.
What sample set do you need for it to be something that you can actually report as a thing that's true?
Yeah. I think, like, personally, I hate the phrase statistically significant. And like, here's a perfect example why. No, it's not. but here's why. Like, I will use a de-identified example from a study I'm on right now, where like we found a statistically significant difference in people reporting on an activity from year 1 to year 2. Okay, so we're like, oh, statistically significant. This is such an important finding. The statistical significance was like less than a 10th movement. Okay. That was statistically significant. And so like, this is why I hate the term, because it's like, depending on like your sample size and like how many variables you're putting into the equation, changes that like seem practically big, where I'm like, oh, I would actually care about that, could not be statistically significant. And changes that seem like stupidly small in the real world could be statistically significant. So like, it's a weird goal to have outside of academia, right? Because it's just like kind of like this, when you like demystify the thing, it's like, I don't know, like if it's less than a 10th of a point, like I don't know if I really care about that.
I feel like there should be like a difference between statistically significant and give a shit, right?
Yes.
So like, so I have a great example of this from my own personal life. When I was making babies, we got to the babies have to come out stage.
Right.
And they were like, hey, so you're old and you're fat. And that means that it's much huge, significant, statistically significant increase in the instance of stillborn babies. You say that to a pregnant woman, she's going to freak out every fucking time, every time. Right. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm killing my baby just being me. And so freak out, right? And they're like, right, so because of this, like we need to schedule for you to be induced so the baby can definitely be here before such and so. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Whatever you have to do to make my baby happy, right?
Oh my
Freaking
gosh.
out. We pulled up the numbers. Girl, it went from a 0.2% instance of stillbirth to a 0.6% instance of stillbirth. Now, that is more than doubled. From a purely mathematical perspective, yes, it is a much higher percentage. It is still so goddamn low that, like, that's like, talk about bury the lead, right? Like, look, you're going to be fine. Overabundance of caution. We're going to do this thing that sounds crazy, right? But like that, I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is that like people like, oh, it's statistically significant.
I literally never care. I'm like, oh, good for you. I guess you'll get published in a really cool journal. Like, it was just like, whatever, man. Like, it's just I'm such a dumb jerk, but like, who cares? You know what I mean? And like, maybe I care, but I care because of like the practical implications. And I think people just like, no, like, why does no one want to give context? You know what I mean? I feel like I would rather have someone give me, if someone came to me and was like, we did this really crappy study, but like, here are all the facts on what we did. I would like that person and their study so much more than someone who's like, we found statistically significant things and like gave me zero information on what they did. You know what I mean? I'm like, if you did like a crappy job or you're just doing things because it's convenient, I actually don't think that's bad. I think it's bad to pretend like that's not what you did. Like, people want information, and like, I get that at as an organization, as a business, at some point, like, you want to get some information. Like, I don't think you want to make decisions based on bad information, but maybe you can't get the best information, but like, don't get your kind of crappy information and pretend like it's this like magical thing that everyone should be looking at. Like, that's ridiculous.
And I think that, job seeking is one of those things that people are desperate, right? Like, continuing to have a home and food are literally what is at risk. And so for them, having these bad pseudo facts come out, like, they feel like they're clinging to an answer. And I just think it's extra cruel. And I think that the bad news is that really no number that you're going to get that way is going to be useful, because of all the stuff that we've talked about. Like, it's just not possible to conduct that research in a meaningful way without such a ridiculous level of buy-in, financial backing, etc., that no fucker is going to do it.
Yeah, it would be great if anyone wants to do it.
Kirsten's
Michele and I will help you. Let's do
Kirsten
it.
is here. She's on it. Let's do it. All we're looking for is funding. Big discount. Very cheap, no problem. $3 million, not the problem.
We really just want to know how long people look at a resume. Although, like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I don't know. I wouldn't even really want to know that. It's like,
it's not really the point, right? The point is that you need to get my attention straight away. So there's better ways to track that. But I think that, for people who are looking at these numbers thinking, oh shit, I need to move the needle, I need to do something different, or, who do I trust? If I can't trust the stats, who can I trust? Well, the answer is that you have to find somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about, and then you need to listen to them.
Yeah. But you should, like, this is where you can like apply some like critical thinking. Like, when you pick a person, you gotta dig into them. You know what I mean? Like, and look at what they're reporting about, like, their success rates, or like, what is their experience. Like, I just think, because my like recent like beef has been, so many people are now like, a lot of people run their own business now, which, like, on one hand, I'm like, it's great, so many people run their own business, but like, a lot of people are using the term like, I'm a self-proclaimed expert and blah blah blah. And like, at least you're calling yourself a self-proclaimed expert, but like, I worry about the people who are like desperate and are like, okay, well, this person's an expert. They're going to get me a job. And like, that person has no freaking experience. They're not going to be able to get you a job. And so I think like you really do have to do like your due diligence and like look into the people and what they're saying and just kind of like, is this someone you can trust?
And that's not easy because, PR is right. Like you can say all kinds of things about yourself, and some of the best people are not the ones screaming from the rooftops about how fucking amazing they are. And, I know for myself, I get frustrated because I'm very noisy about my beliefs around things like diversity and inclusion and that sort of stuff. I get people who are like, oh, so you're a DEI specialist. No, bitch. Those folks have worked hard and have a bunch of qualifications and information that I don't fucking know. I'm just showing up as a queer chick from, who's half Native American. That's what I know. That's what I know. Right. Like I know my personal experience in this sector. I know how recruitment works because I've been doing it for God knows forever. But that's like, other than that, it's just shit that has crossed my sphere that was of interest to me or what have you. I am not an expert. And I see, especially in areas like resume writing, career coaching, DEI, like all kinds, like things where it is harder to quantify that, yes, you have the, requisite credentials to classify as an expert, that people just self-proclaim left, right, and fucking center. And it's really frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems to me, it's just like wrong. You know what I mean? And it's not, I think people can be self-taught. I'm not like, I think everyone needs to go and like get a PhD or get an MBA or I don't think that that's true at all.
We don't all
But
have to be you, Dr.
we
Kirsten.
don't, I like try to be really careful with that. I'm like, I actually like when I'm like, I think people should work with a researcher. It's like, I think like if someone did the equivalent like experience level that I had and like didn't get a PhD, then like maybe, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like it's not like
But here's my problematizing of that, right? Because I'm gonna so like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, right? Like everybody knows
Yeah.
you do it
Yeah.
for 10,000 hours, you're an expert. The bullshit.
Yeah. We should
And
look into
Malcolm,
that.
and like he's even come back and been like, yeah, this is a really fucking stupid idea. I don't know what I was thinking. Because just because you've done it for 10,000 hours doesn't mean you're fucking good at it. You may have been practicing doing it really badly for 10,000 hours. And I think that is, I come across that all the time as well, right? People who are like, oh, well, they must be a great resume writer. They've been doing it for 15 years. And?
Yeah.
So the fuck what?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, that just means that they've gotten away with it for 15 fucking years. It doesn't mean they were any good. My mom's been cooking for 68 years. You don't want her to cook anything. She's a terrible cook. Oh my God. Like,
That's so true. Time like doesn't equal time is time. Doesn't equal like being good at something. This is kind of why like I think people should actually like why you should get like feedback from clients and why like everyone should be coming up with some freaking like pre-post measure of like how are people different as a result of working with you, because like then that's your pitch, you know what I mean? Like one pitch could be like people who you think you say you're good at resumes because people you work with like get hired. We don't really know like if you cause them to get hired, but like you could have that. But like you could get stats on like people who work with me like feel more confident. I love to do these jumps, right? Like if you measured like confidence in some aspect of applying for jobs, like before and after someone worked with you, and you could say people became more confident applying for jobs. Then you could do like this hop on over to like Google Scholar and find research that shows if you feel more confident about applying for jobs, like you're more likely to get a job sooner. And now you can like put these two pieces together and be like, hi, I'm Michele. I take you to step one. Step one, you feel more confident applying to jobs. And therefore, like based on all this fucking research, you are more likely to get a job. And now it's like you're not lying, right? And then you can be like, and also like 25% of people, like 75, 100% of people who worked with me end up with jobs in 5 months. And I can't say that's all because of me, but like draw a conclusion you will from that, right? Like it's just,
So
Instead,
we do stuff like that already because we know, but so again, our data is difficult because it's all self-reported. So I can't know how useful it is. What gets reported to me by my customers is that they get about a 300% increase in interviews within a week of using my resumes. But again, self-reported data, I know that that's basically code for bullshit, right? Like that's what they tell me. I know that my clients tend to start work, and by tend, I mean about 85% plus start work within 4 weeks of using our tools. Absolutely. Does that mean that every single one of them has? No, it does not. I have one client whom I love dearly who just keeps turning down jobs that she doesn't like their face. She keeps getting job offers. And she's like, Michele, I just didn't think they were right for me. I'm like, girl, I'm not paying your rent. You do you. You go and find the one that's going to make you happy. But so, like, there's no way to account for that. And again, like, it makes everything a lot more complicated. And so, it is, all of these areas are very difficult. And I guess I would say, as an overall message, anytime you go to work with a professional, if they start lobbing a bunch of statistics at you about the market, about their work, any of that, that is all the red flags right there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just say no to bad stats.
Yeah. And I always like to have this disclaimer to protect myself from libel and slander also, is that with all of like with ladders, with talent works, like the thing is, it's like we just don't know if it's good. You know what I mean? Like it's like maybe it is all true, but you're not giving enough information. And like this is the case with like a lot of people. Like it's like maybe this was a really great maybe it was rigorous, but you're not giving me any of the information that suggests that. So like you don't have credibility in my book. And like that's the problem. That's what everyone does, where it's like just be freaking transparent. And if you're out there and you come across a stat, I think I mentioned this last time on your podcast. I'm like, do people like not remember like the 5 W's from like elementary school? I'm like, if you see a stat, it's like you just need to know. It's like, who the F did this data come from? Right? Like you need to know who, like what's their gender, what's their race, what's their ethnicity, where are they living, right? You need to know who, you need to know what the F kind of information it was. Is it like information from our secret internal database? Is it a survey? Is it an interview? Like bonus would be if you can actually see the dang questions that they asked, but like you need to know what. You need to know when the information is from, because I kid you not, I read an article that was published this year on how being a CEO is a deadly affair. And it was based on data from the freaking 1970s and 80s. What? Like,
but that
so
happens so much, like to get these sensationalized headlines. People just go with wherever they can find data that backs up the narrative that they want to tell.
Right. So you got to, so who, what, when, where, that's like geography matters, right? Like people, I think especially in the US, we're like, oh, this must be coming from like the US. And it's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's also like rural versus urban. Like there's a lot of issues with like location. And then we talked about this last time and in between our podcasts also, the why. Like what was the purpose of collecting the information? Because if you're like trying to sell something, like that's very different than if you're like an independent evaluator getting this information. Like what was actually like, why did you set out to answer like this question? And if you don't know that, it's like this is probably going to be misused. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like
no, absolutely. Like if I come up and I start trying to, if I were to commission a study, right? I've got to about how long people look at resumes. I have a dog in the hunt. I'm trying to sell you fucking resume rewrites. You should really question everything about that.
Yeah. Right. So, well, that's why people hire external people. And it's like, we have to have an independent person look at this because like, you shouldn't trust me. I have skin in the game. And it's like, yeah, that's freaking right.
So I feel like we have officially smashed 2 myths of the recruitment world.
At least
So,
two. Like
at least
every
two.
stat on that one website.
Just crazy town. So, listeners out there, send us the myths that you would like Kirsten and I to bust. And I will
Yes.
unleash the hounds of research that are Dr. Kirsten Lee Hill.
That would be so fun. Everyone just submit all of the BS you come across in your day.
And we will take it all apart and tell you the truth. Until next time, thank you. And thank you, Kirsten, for all of your help.
Yes, thank you. This was so fun.
You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job. For more information on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta for more insider information. Soon, you'll be hearing us say, I'm Michele Olivier, and hey, I want your job.